Station Manager at Palmer Station.
Thanks, Steve. Hello. Much smaller group this time around, not as intimidating. Lots of nice smiles. Welcome to the Palmer area. I am going to give you just a general overview of the United States Antarctic Program, and then I'll pass the mic over to Carolyn, and she's our lab manager, and she'll talk more specifically about the science that's happening at Palmer Station. So the United States Antarctic Program is funded with U.S. taxpayer dollars. Research and support functions are administered by the National Science Foundation. You'll meet some of the folks from Station here in a little bit. A handful of those are support people. So the idea is that when the scientists show up at Palmer Station, they can just hit the ground running and not worry about the power and the food and the IT support and all that kind of thing. Lockheed Martin currently holds the support contract, and there's a whole handful of subcontractors that are supporting the contract as well. So as you might imagine, the logistics and operations for a program like this can be quite complicated. There are a lot of federal agencies that are involved in supporting the program. Just a few of them are the Air Force, NOAA, NASA, the Air National Guard, and the Navy. So there's basically three types of science that we're doing down here. The first one is research for the fundamental knowledge of the Antarctic continent, or things that are specific to Antarctica. Next is research on Antarctica's role in the global systems. And then research using Antarctica as a platform, so not really looking at anything specific to Antarctica. And I'll give some examples here. There's a few research groups that are now using high-resolution satellite images to do penguin censuses. And to count an individual penguin is a little bit difficult because they're too small. So someone's come up with a complex idea or solution to counting penguins looking at the poo extent. They're also starting to count seals in the same way, but seals are a little bit bigger, so they can count them individually. And as technologies advance, researchers are beginning to understand more and more about what's happening under the ice. This is a project that happened a few years ago. It was a multinational project. All these countries here were involved in it. What they did was use these twin otters that were equipped with ground-penetrating radar and seismometers, and they were able to map this subglacial mountain range. So a mountain range that no one's ever seen. It's covered by, lots of ice. There we are with the ice covered again. And just recently, too, researchers are beginning to understand that there's a whole series of lakes and rivers that are underneath the ice. Actual liquid water, and this water has a big impact on the ice on top of it. So they're studying what the effects of climate are on the eastern and western ice sheets and how that might affect sea levels. This is a project that is using Antarctica as a platform. It's called the Long Duration Balloon Flight. The balloon on the left is filled with helium, and it rises up into the atmosphere and gets caught up in the circumpolar vortex and circles around the continent, gathering information about the atmosphere. And it would be, you could gather this same type of information sending something up into space, but it's much more economical to do it in this manner. And on the right, you can see all the tracks that they've run to gather information. South Pole Station is a very good place to do astronomy. The air there is very light and thin, and you can point a telescope at the same part of the sky for 24 hours a day. This is the 10 meters telescope at South Pole, and you can see just how big it is by this little person down here in the corner. The NSF is also very interested in outreach. And so we welcome about 10 to 12 cruise ships each year, so you guys are fortunate enough to be one of those. And also our researchers are very involved in outreach and do a lot of live chats with schools and other organizations back in the States, letting them know what kind of research they're doing. So the United States Antarctic Program has 3 year-round stations: there's Palmer Station, where we are now, South Pole Station, and McMurdo Station. This is McMurdo, and it's the largest of the 3 stations. In the summer months, they can have up to 1,200 people. This water in front is generally frozen over. It did just all go out last week. I think they had a big windstorm and it blew out. But normally that's all frozen over. And each year the resupply ship comes down, and the icebreaker breaks a path into this pier. And this is a pier that's made out of ice. Each year when the ice freezes over, they pour water on it and put rebar on it and make this floating dock. And the resupply ship brings all the supplies for the next year, all the cleaning materials, all the food, all the consumable items. And then we gather up all the waste and take that out and send it back to the States. Right here are the dorms. This is the main building that houses the post office and the galley and the store. This building here is Crary Laboratory, which is bigger than all Palmer Station. Back here in the background is Observation Hill. So to get to McMurdo, you might take one of these Air Force planes and land on the frozen sea ice. The ice is about 6 or 7 feet thick. It's a really soft landing because the ice kind of gives a little bit when that plane touches down. If you're going out into the deep field, you might go out there in one of these Twin Otters or Baslers. These are flown by Kenborg Air out of Calgary, Canada. If you're going to study penguins or seals on the sea ice, you might go out on a snowmobile, or maybe you're going to go to the dry valleys in a helicopter. And these are the LC-130s that the Air National Guard out of Schenectady, New York fly. They fly them into the deep field, and then these planes are also the workhorses that take all the people and some of the fuel to South Pole Station. And you can see they're equipped with skis. And this is South Pole Station, just flat white, nothing as far as you can see. And South Pole Station is broken up into different quadrants, so depending on what type of research you're doing, that'll say where your work will be set up. If you're doing seismic work, you'll be in the quiet section. Balloon work is done in the downwind area. Telescopes are set up in this dark sector where they try to have no lights. And this is the atmospheric research area where they try to keep the air real clean. This is the new South Pole Station that was completed about 5 or 6 years ago. You're all probably familiar with the old geodesic dome that was gradually being covered by snow and ice. So they built this new station, and it's on stilts, so that when snow and ice can just blow underneath. As it does build up, they can lift it up and insert these giant discs. So hopefully this one won't get covered up. We'll see how that works. The South Pole is located at the geographic South Pole. In this corner right here is the marker. And each year on January 1st, they go and reset that marker, because South Pole Station is sitting on a 2-mile thick ice sheet that's constantly moving, and it moves about 30 feet a year or an inch a day. It's a picture of the southern lights at the South Pole in the winter. Quite spectacular. The program also has 2 research vessels. The one on the right is the Nathaniel B. Palmer. They're over in the Ross Sea area right now doing research, and they do research all around the southern oceans. On the left is the Lawrence M. Gould, and that's the ship that's kind of near and dear to our hearts at Palmer Station, because they bring all of our people and supplies back and forth from South America. And this is what we think is the best little research station in all of Antarctica, Palmer Station. It's the smallest of the 3 research stations. We have a max population of 45 in the summer months, and mainly study marine biology. So we're going to go on a little tour of Palmer Station now. This is one of our labs, state-of-the-art labs. Our aquarium. Carolyn's going to talk here in a little bit about the ice fish. So sometime, usually in the winter months, we have these tanks full of ice fish. I think this one has krill in it right now. And we do have some krill researchers. They'll be up on stage here in a little bit. This is our satellite station, so we have 24-hour coverage. Not much bandwidth though, probably about the same size of what one house would have back in the States, and so we all have to try and share. Some people are better than sharing than others. We have two 250 kilowatt diesel engines that power station. We have two main buildings at Palmer, so we try to have redundancies in case we ran into an emergency situation. So we have two reverse osmosis that we use for our water, and then we have an emergency generator in the other building. And we also have emergency food caches. This is our clinic. It's very well equipped, and we are set up for telemedicine back to the States. This is what one of the dorm rooms look like. It's pretty tight. It's probably the thing that makes people the least happy at Palmer, is being in a little space like that. This is our kitchen and galley area. We have a really nicely equipped gym, and you can be doing the elliptical machine and watching the humpbacks spout. It's pretty cool. This is our little bar. Bring your own bottle. We have a little pool table that flips over to a ping pong table. We like to play a lot of cards. We have a popcorn machine back in the corner. It's our lounge. And now I will hand the mic over to Carolyn.
So because Palmer Station is located right here on the coast of Anvers Island, it makes it an ideal place to study the polar marine ecosystem. So a lot of the research that happens here is marine biology or oceanography based. We also have several ongoing atmospheric and meteorological projects as well. In order to facilitate researchers getting out onto the water and to the surrounding islands, we operate a fleet of Zodiac boats, the same boats that you may have seen us pull up in earlier. Some of our boats are open just for transporting people to islands, but some of them are also set up with mini oceanographic sampling platforms. So they have wires and winches so researchers can lower instrumentation down into the water to collect data. They can also collect discrete water samples or tow nets to collect plankton, and then bring all of those samples back to the lab for further processing. There are 24 different research projects at Palmer Station this year. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. One neat project that's been ongoing at Palmer for several years is this chemical ecology project run by a group from the University of Alabama. And they are a sort of a team of ecologists and chemists, and they look at organisms that live on the sea floor, things like sponges, tunicates, and algae. There's a very complex benthic ecosystem here. And what this group was interested in was how the organisms that can't move, the things like sponges that can't run away from their predators, how do they avoid getting eaten? And it turns out that many of these organisms synthesize defense chemicals in their bodies, and that makes them unpalatable or poisonous even to their would-be predators. After isolating some of these chemicals and characterizing them, the group also decided to see if they have any medicinal qualities in people, and it turns out some of them do. So they isolated a compound from a sponge that has anti-malarial activity, a compound from red algae that has antiviral activity, and even a compound from tunicates that has some preliminary anti-cancer activity. So this research is really interesting, not only from the ecological perspective, but perhaps could lead to some new avenues for drug development as well. There are also researchers that come to Palmer Station to study the insects that live on the islands in our area. Their primary study subject is this very small wingless fly called Belgica antarctica. You can see here the adults in the middle. It's only about 3 millimeters long, but it is technically Antarctica's largest land animal. So if you're looking for something that spends its entire life cycle on land and never migrates off of the continent, this is the biggest thing you're going to find. And why the researchers are so interested in the Belgica is because in the larval form, which is this picture on the left, they're extremely resistant to changes in their environment. They can withstand pretty big temperature ranges, they can be deprived of oxygen for weeks, they can withstand huge ranges of pH, they can even be dried up to only 30% of their original body weight and still survive. So they're interested in trying to understand what in the physiology of these little larvae and their gene regulation allows them to withstand ranges of conditions that would kill most other insects. As Rebecca mentioned, we also do a lot of research on ice fish down here. The ice fish are a really unique group of fishes that live in the waters surrounding Antarctica. They're unlike most other fish around the world. They lack swim bladders, they have an almost completely decalcified skeleton, and they're also the only vertebrates that we know of that don't have hemoglobin in their blood. So hemoglobin is what circulates oxygen around our bodies. It's what gives blood its red color. And we and all other vertebrates that we know of have hemoglobin except for these ice fish. The picture on the left shows 2 samples of fish blood. The tube on the left is a sample of rock cod blood. This is a fish that's very closely related to the ice fish, but they still produce hemoglobin, they still have red blood cells, so their blood is red like ours. And the ice fish blood is the tube on the right. It's completely colorless because they lack hemoglobin and they lack red blood cells. So the researchers for a long time have been trying to figure out how the ice fish get along without hemoglobin and how they've evolved over time to lose the ability to produce hemoglobin. With all the advances in genetic techniques, they can also now start to sequence the genomes of these 2 groups of fish, so the ice fish and the rock cod. And they're specifically looking for genes that are present in the rock cod but absent in the ice fish. And amongst that subset of genes, they're hoping to find genes that are important for hemoglobin synthesis and red blood cell synthesis. Also at Palmer is a really neat project called the Palmer Long-Term Ecological Research Study. And the idea of this program is to study not just one specific topic, but the polar ecosystem as a whole, and to do so for an extended period of time. So here at Palmer Station, they're studying the marine environment. So it's a collaboration between 4 different research groups. One group is studying the bacteria that are in the seawater, one group is studying the phytoplankton, the plant plankton, one group studies the krill, and the final group studies the top predators like penguins, seabirds, and whales. And by all working together, they can really start to see how these different communities interact, how the communities change with the course of the seasons, and also how the communities change from year to year. This is now the 23rd year of this project at Palmer Station, so we have a multi-decadal data set now that can really start to tell us how the ecosystem here is functioning and how it's changing. It was very fortuitous that in the 90s they decided to put this project here at Palmer Station, because we now know that the Western Antarctic Peninsula is one of the most rapidly warming areas on the planet. In our local area, we're seeing changes here, especially in glacial ice. So our Anvers Island is covered by the Mar Ice Piedmont. It's a big glacier. Our little corner of the island is here. Here's Palmer Station. You can see the current edge of the ice in the satellite image, and then the yellow line that cuts across the middle is where the edge of the glacier was in 1975. So you can see it's retreating pretty dramatically here at a rate of about 30 feet per year, and that's consistent with what's happening up and down the Western Antarctic Peninsula. We're also seeing a more warm, moist maritime environment here at Palmer. The average winter temperature in our area has increased over the last 50 years by 6 degrees Celsius, a pretty substantial change. And from that LTER data set, we also know that some of the ice-dependent species in our area, their population is starting to go down. So specifically the Adelie penguins In the 70s, there were over 15,000 nesting pairs in our local area. And this year, the counts are coming in just over 2,300 nesting pairs, so a pretty substantial decrease. We're also conversely seeing an increase in sub-Antarctic penguin species like chinstraps and gentoos. Palmer Station opened for science in 1970, and while they were back then also studying the polar marine ecosystem, with all the advances in technology, the tools available to researchers have changed dramatically since then. Some of the neat tools that we can employ now are seabird tags. So they're very small satellite transmitters that can be affixed to the backs of giant petrels or penguins. And then the researchers can see in real time exactly where these birds are going to feed, how long they're away from the nests on each feeding trip, how deep the penguins are diving, and all sorts of really neat information that they weren't able to get before with just the traditional band and resighting techniques. The oceanography groups are also starting to bring down these autonomous underwater vehicles. So they call them gliders. They're about 6 feet long, and you can take oceanographic instruments and sort of strap them to the side of the glider. And then they program the glider to go sample wherever they're interested in the water. They can swim around for about 2 to 4 weeks and then come back to Palmer. Every once in a while, they'll stick their tail out of the water and send home data all the way to New Jersey and get new trajectory points. And it's pretty amazing. They can collect a huge amount of data, much more than we can using sort of traditional techniques by hand. Also this year, we now have a coastal radar array set up in the Palmer area. So this tells us what all the surface currents are doing in this big 1,500 square kilometer area. And that's really helping us understand the oceanography of our little corner of Antarctica, and more specifically how that oceanography affects the foraging patterns of the larger animals. So the science at Palmer is always changing, which makes it a really interesting and fun place to work. When you go back home, if you'd like more information about the U.S. Antarctic Program, this is their website, www.usap.gov. There's links to articles about science that's happening all around the continent. There's a photo library. There's links to educational resources for teachers and all sorts of other really great stuff. So this is a fun resource to check out when you're back home. So thanks very much for coming to our talk, and I'll invite the other folks from Palmer up for questions.
Maybe we'll go down the line and have folks introduce themselves and say what their position is and where they're from.
Yep, so my name is Carolyn. I'm the lab supervisor at Palmer, and I'm from Wisconsin.
Still Rebecca. I grew up in Colorado and currently am living in Bellingham, Washington.
I'm Tracy Shaw. I am originally from California and just moved to Rhode Island from Oregon, and I study krill.
Hi, I'm Ben. I do facilities maintenance, and I'm from Iowa.
Hi, I'm Megan. Sorry I'm late. Had to get some ice cream. I'm a PhD grad student at the University of Delaware, and I'm using some of those yellow robots that you saw to study penguins.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm a biological oceanographer from Oregon State University.
Hi, I'm Monisha Subla. I am from Rutgers University. I'm an undergraduate and I'm from New Jersey, and I'm studying the effects of ocean acidification on krill.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Olander. I work in General Waste. I'm from Colorado, and I currently live in Oregon.
I knew that was going to get a clap. That's the only reason I said it. I knew it.
Okay, stick up your hand if you got a question, and we'll go through some questions for a bit. There's actually been more and more science conducted in the spring and fall, so the season at Palmer has extended, and as was indicated, in some cases they'll bring in research personnel specifically in the winter. The Gould can actually get into Palmer on a year-round basis. It can't always get to the pier in the wintertime, but it can get down to the station on a year-round basis.
What about medical care?
We have a physician on station. She's a general practitioner, and I think you saw the pictures of the clinic, so it's quite well equipped. The University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston is who she's in touch with if she needs specialists, and we have that telemedicine set up, so it's a really good system. We sometimes do need medevacs, not real often though. This time of year it's nice because there's lots of ships and we have lots of resources. Later in the year there's not ships coming down, and we have a few times had to fly twin otters down, and they can land on the glacier in the backyard. As the years go by though, the glacier's starting to not be in as good a shape, so if we've had lots of rain and stuff, it can be kind of tricky landing back there. So, but right now that is a resource for us as well.
I've been reading recently about an invasion of a variety of king crab. Is any more research finding on that?
Funny you should ask. So there's actually a research cruise that's starting in about a week and a half that is studying exactly that, looking at where the current extent of the crabs is, and if whether or not they're a breeding population, all sorts of stuff about that. So stay tuned.
Hi, this is Dolores from Seattle. Hello. Do you have cooks and janitors and maids, or do you share in all those things?
Good question. We have two excellent cooks that cook for us, and then we are the janitors. So everybody here, even if you're a world-renowned scientist, ends up cleaning the toilets on Saturdays. So it's pretty good.
Hi there. Hi there. What impact has there been on global warming with the ingress of all the personnel and equipment and resource that you use over there? Has there been any research done on that?
Yeah, that question comes up frequently. Most of the Antarctic stations are looking at ways to reduce their impact. For example, at McMurdo Station we put in 3 large wind generators and reduced our fuel consumption 25%. Palmer Station has been looked at over the years. It's not a site for solar panels, for obvious reasons, and you saw it today. It's also not a site for wind because of the concerns about impact on animals and the birds, so you don't want a big propeller spinning around. We are looking at, before I left, we were starting to look at, once we have to replace the generators, the diesel electric generators, that Palmer is considered looking at fuel cells and install those. Fuel cell technology has gotten to the point now where it's pretty reliable, and your exhaust from your fuel cell system is waste heat and water, so you don't have any those issues. All of the materials that are generated to trash and waste in the station are removed, and when you really want to think about the overall impact, the very, very small amount of impact from the stations throughout Antarctica is nothing compared to the impact of human beings in the rest of the globe, and that as it comes down. So the impacts of the facilities on the Antarctic do not have a significant impact to the environment in Antarctica. The big impact is from the rest of mankind.
Do you have a time limit to complete your findings? And if you don't complete them in that time, does somebody else come in to complete it?
Yes, we generally do have a time limit. Where are you? I don't like not knowing who I'm talking to. Oh, okay, thank you, hi. Yes, typically we'll have a set time limit. So for example, the project that I'm working on, we arrived here in December. the majority of our group arrived in January and have just left, and then there's just a few more of us remaining until mid-March. And so typically the window of time where we're doing our investigation is, for our research, it's governed by what we're working on. We're looking at foraging Adelie penguins and how changes in the physical and biological environment affect where they forage. So obviously we want to be around here when they're doing their peak foraging and when they're in the breeding season. If we don't finish what we aim to do, there isn't someone else coming down after us to follow it up. We then have to go to the National Science Foundation and request additional time, potentially even put in another proposal to do that.
I'm very sorry, but I don't want to be a pessimist. Is there an emergency that could happen at Palmer Station that could cause an evacuation or cause a crisis?
A big threat, we've never had a problem at Palmer, but fire can be a significant impact if, when the building's caught on fire. We have volunteer firefighters at Palmer, but they've only been through a week of training. So if we had an incident, the first thing that we want to do is get a count of everyone on station and make sure they're all okay. If someone was missing, we'd have to make a determination of whether or not it was reasonable to go in and get them without injuring anyone else. And then it might just become a defensive thing and trying to save the other buildings. So I think that's probably the bigger thing that could happen. Sometimes we have the flu and stuff that go through station. But yeah, we've never had anything real big, but we try to, be as safe as we can. We're very careful about not having candles and having the whole community aware of things that might cause a fire, and so we're very alert and aware, and prevention is huge for us.
How frequently is the station resupplied? And can you request things to be brought in from the mainland if you have special needs, special items, and how long does it take to get them?
In general, we have a ship come down maybe every 4 weeks or so, so we get resupplied quite often. Our food usually comes from the States in 2 shipments a year, and we do have, we call it a silver trunk that goes back and forth from the States, so you could send a little piece of flat mail to Denver and then they'd bring it, someone would bring it down as luggage. But it's very comfortable there, we're well fed, and yeah, it's not, there's not a lot of suffering.
Good afternoon. As far as the research topics are concerned, is there a list of topics that are controlled by the organization, or can a student apply for like a doctoral thesis on a research topic of their own?
There's an application process or a proposal submission process to the National Science Foundation, specifically for the Antarctic Research Program. And typically you'll have the PIs, the principal investigators, who are faculty at universities, for example. They will submit proposals and they'll generally include students on that. But there are some fellowships that students can apply themselves to get funding to come down here. One of them is the postdoctoral fellowship award, and that means that particular person can come down and do their own research solely of their own making.
NSF is quite different from most federal government agencies that fund science, because NSF funds peer-reviewed science. And the Antarctic is a little different because we have a geographic location, but the program managers at the various disciplines in the Office of Polar Programs do not determine the science that's going to be done. That's determined by what comes in the proposal. It's reviewed by peers in the field. There are organizations in the United States and internationally, like SCAR, which is that Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research that I mentioned before, National Academy of Sciences is in that. They will make recommendations or suggestions of areas of research that need to be done in the Antarctic, but it's a peer-reviewed, driven program. The individual investigators that submit the proposals are the ones that determine what research is going to be done. From time to time, NSF will try to look at, well, we got a core group of people who are going to work in this area, so logistically and operationally we're going to establish a facility there, so we'll make an announcement. Is there anyone else who would like to work in that region so we can take advantage of that capability that's already going to be there and flesh it out and have more stuff. The schedule for the ships kind of laid out in advance, particularly the Palmer that goes all around Antarctica. So you'll try to match up science projects and where the ship is going to be cruising around Antarctica, and that goes out a couple of years in advance.
With all the other countries that have stations on Antarctica, do you, what can I say, sort of get together and share your findings and your research with other countries, or do they just tend to, sort of stick to their own?
We do have, well, for example, as Dave just mentioned, the Scientific Committee for Antarctic Research holds a conference, and at those meetings there'll be scientists who study specifically Antarctic or various aspects of Antarctica, and we'll meet all together and for a week solid discuss and share our findings, and that is obviously international, and it's a really great way to broaden your understanding of the environment and of the science that you're actually interested in, and to make collaborations and start forming strong networks. And the Antarctic community, or the Antarctic research community, is very strong, and I feel, and that's across nations. There's a lot of camaraderie and people working together for the greater good of Antarctica.
Yeah, once an investigator receives funding from NSF, they have the ability to reach out to other international collaborators that are working in that field and include them in their field group. And additionally, there's a lot of multinational projects that are done where the scope of a project is too large for one country to take on. And there's also quite a bit of cooperation where, say, another country, say Germany, there'll be a research group in Germany who would like to work in the McMurdo Dry Valleys, and they'll go through the German Antarctic program, approach NSF and say, could you support a group of ours in the dry valleys? And what NSF will do is say, yeah, we'll do that, and we'll look to see where the German facilities are, and do we have a U.S. group of researchers that would like to work in that region? And that happens all the time as a quid pro quo deal. There's no money. We don't charge a German group to work in the dry valleys. We'll try to see if we can work out, put some U.S. investigators on the Polar Stern, the German research vessel. All those kind of things go on every year, all the time, between all the countries that are operating in the Antarctic region.
Science usually has a lot of serendipitous, unanticipated results. You were trying for one thing and something else came up. And also we learn a lot from cross-collaboration and sharing results with people just to get their ideas. How is that done in Palmer facility?
How are we working with others?
How are you helping each other collaborate across fields and discipline? Like you once a week report on what you're doing just to get ideas from the other people in the field?
Yeah, definitely. So I feel really grateful to be a part of a really multidisciplinary project. We have Kim, who's doing krill stuff. I'm doing robot and penguin stuff. We have physical oceanographers, and we're studying surface currents. We're studying tides and internal waves, and using the robots to study the physical properties beneath the surface and the phytoplankton that the krill eat, and yada yada. And so we're taking a whole ecosystem approach to kind of understand what's going on. And each person in our group has a different specialty, and so we are constantly talking about what we're finding every day, what we think is going on, other things that we can test, how we can help each other, how we can share data. So yeah, definitely.
This question is for the permanent staff. Is this an 8:30 to 5 job? And do you have annual leave? And do you have public holidays? And what do you do in your spare time?
It's a 7:30 to 5:30 job. And there's one day off a week. If the shower doesn't break. Then I fix it on Sunday. Free time? Yeah, we don't have a lot of free time. So we have a gym which gets heavily used this year, way more than any other year that I've been a part of. A lot of activities, cards playing, movies, snowshoeing, skiing, snowboarding, hiking. This year hasn't been quite as big for that as other years, but some years it's just huge. Go out and play frisbee golf.
Yeah, the National Science Foundation and the NRE program is very fortunate because most of the people that choose to work in the NRE program, the contractor pays them for 6 9-hour days. They don't get any overtime. How many of you guys only work 6 9-hour days? Yeah, I know the answer to that question. None of them. They work when the work needs to be done. And it's one of the challenges as a manager that you have to rein the folks back because otherwise towards the end of the season they're what we call toast. They're all burned out and you gotta get them to pace themselves through the season. But most people who work in the Antarctic, either from the science side or the support side, are there because they want to be there, and you really get a tremendous overall effort from the community because of that. And I can say that from a personal observation for many years. It's a marvelous place to work with a marvelous group of people that choose to work there.